Great. Thank you, Todd. Thank you, Mr. Minister, for your presentation. Thank you, all of you, for being here. And thanks for the opportunity to share my work. You know, we have a lot of professors here, a lot of researchers here, many of them engineering professors, which means they're far smarter than I will ever be. But my role is different. My role is not to teach you these technologies. My role is to help leaders, help people in business make sense of these technologies. So it's not all the detailed specifics, it's how can you get the right mindset? How can you think about these things a little bit differently? How can you make some decisions? And then you can work with the smart technology people to make these things happen in your business. So that's when we talk about integrating technology, generative AI in your business strategy, that's the kind of things I'm hoping to share with you over the next 20 minutes. I've been doing digital transformation research since before it was a word. And so since 2010, this is the next wave of digital transformation. This is a set of technologies can make big changes happen in business, but you need to understand enough about this so you can help to make that happen. So what is generative AI? You know, the talks before and after, we'll talk about it in detail. I want to emphasize one thing though. Create new content that resembles human-made information. Resembles human-made information. It can do it faster. It may be able to handle more complexity than humans can, but it's not a human. It's a very useful tool that you can put to work here, and there are many things you can do in companies with this, right? With generative AI, big unstructured data things you can aggregate, you can summarize, you can find patterns, you can find anomalies. All of these different things are possible with these tools if you do them the right way. Now, what we're seeing already that's happening out there, some of the businesses, some of the best use cases we're seeing right now tend to be very much focused on the text and the transformation kind of stuff. So for example, you know, I can produce a video very quickly from text, and that video can be any face, any language, very easily. It's a great opportunity, but that's not the only opportunity we have to do this. Other things we see, certainly you've heard about coding and the Copilot and how that can be very helpful, you know, not only in doing this work, but also in learning this work. I'm working with a team from the Media Lab. We are creating a tutor for the first programming class. So you have a teaching assistant. Every individual has a personalized teaching assistant any hour of the day to help them get through here. Tremendously useful opportunities. Then we're seeing other things, Cresta, among others, teaching people working in call centers how to be better call center workers. They tend to be more productive, they tend to be more accurate, and faster, and actually they tend to stay around longer when you use technologies like this. You can learn how to do this and get better. Junior people get better fast, senior people still get better. And then of course, then there's this whole idea of what about, you know, more than just individuals? Adobe in their product suite now has embedded this in, so as you do your email marketing campaigns and other things, it can help you be faster, be more personalized, and learn faster from what you're doing. These are all things that are happening in the market already. But I want to give you a really important rule to think about. Technology is moving really, really quickly. But we can't forget this one. Technology moves quickly, organizations move much more slowly. And what does that mean? It's not really a technology problem. It is a technology problem. Technology is moving really, really fast, but the hard part is getting your organization to use it the right way. And if I could say it one different way, buying a technology provides zero value to your company. The value comes from when you do business differently because that technology makes it possible. And so this is the limiting factor is not the technology, although that can be a limiting factor. The limiting factor is how do we identify the opportunities and implement them well in your organization. So where are some of these transformations we are seeing? What we're seeing mostly right now is at the individual level. Helping knowledge workers do better knowledge work. And so I got together with one of the leading authors in knowledge management, and we put together an article for Harvard Business Review, and we identified 3 areas where it can help you with knowledge work. And they're right here. Number one is just reducing your cognitive load. And those, how many people have used generative AI, have ChatGPT or anything like that? Have you used it? Okay, if you have not used it, make sure you use it. The only way you're going to be able to learn about this is to play with it and use it. So you know what I mean about making it easier to write things, making it easier to summarize things. But that's not the only situation. We're finding also that this can be a tremendous help in boosting your cognitive capability, not just offloading some, but in boosting it, helping you come up with more creative solutions, helping you look at innovative combinations, helping you ask hard questions about what you're doing. Now, it's not always right, but in a creativity standpoint, it doesn't have to be right. It just needs to spur you to think a little bit differently. And that's a tremendously useful opportunity here that we may or may not be using as much. And the last here is learning with and learning from generative AI, that tutor that I talked about, the call center thing. This is what we did not expect, but it's become a very powerful mechanism for Gen AI to coach people as they move along. So for example, here here's a creative industry, and this is one you would think would be threatened by these kinds of tools, advertising and that kind of thing, and they're finding actually they can't live without it anymore. People who adopt this find they make it useful. They find that they are still valuable. They just do things more quickly, more variety, this kind of work. Okay? So in the digital transformation work that I've been doing for almost 15 years now, we have found 4 areas where you can use any technology to transform your business, 4 areas to look. And those include customer experience, of course, and I've talked about a lot of that, but also operations internally. And we don't see as much of that because often when you make changes in operations, it stays inside. Nobody sees it, but it's still happening, right? Then as the business model work, this thing here has we discovered in our research, this became big enough to have its own section only about 5 years ago. And here's where the generative AI can be very useful already. But the next step is to don't do the low-hanging fruit. Don't just do that kind of work. What can you do to make broader transformation happen? And so, for example, here, this company called Lemonade says that they're using AI, generative AI in general, to do most of the work of their business. Now, I will say that as a company that's designed to have very well-defined processes that AI is good for. But it's starting to happen in other places too. And that's just with information processing. There are insurance selling and insurance claims. But what about if you're moving big materials around? Cisco is supply chain for food service. They have one of the largest fleets of trucks around the world. They deliver raw materials to restaurants and factories and things like this. And here are the places that they say that they are using AI. And that little funny symbol there is where generative AI can be useful. That's not producing documents. That's not drawing new imagery or translating things. That's doing real work in operations, right? Routing your trucks differently, substitutions, this kind of work. So it is starting to happen. It's just not happening as fast as the individual things are. But I would ask you as leaders to think about then, how do we move on? How do we move from the low-hanging fruit to other things? So, first question that you should be asking yourself is, where should we be looking for these opportunities? And I've given you these 4 areas. Where are you going to do it besides just in the employee side? By the way, it becomes very important here, getting the data right. So your technology people can talk to you about it. If they haven't been telling you all about the need to get the data clean, they should be. And if you haven't been investing in that, you should be, right? Getting the data clean can help a lot in this situation. So now, how do you make this work in your company? What do you do? Well, number one, I want you to remember another thing, right? The first thing about it is it's not technology, it's transformation. The second thing to remember is this. Although it's called artificial intelligence, it's not really intelligent. It's just good processing. Right, and Srini mentioned this also, it's not learning, it's memorizing. Now, I am simplifying this a little bit, and there are arguments about what does it mean to be intelligent. But this idea of self-awareness of what you're doing, these kind of things. It doesn't have that yet. It's just really good processing. And we should remember that, and then we can use it for many things, right? So although it's not intelligent, it can act in very intelligent ways. And that's a good thing as long as you know where the limits are. So when we think about generative AI, that is the hot new thing, but it's one of a long line of analytics techniques. And so we have this article in Harvard Business Review just to help make sense of some of this. Now, what I've done is I've taken many, many different frameworks for AI, lots of detail in AI, and we've boiled that down to 4 categories of analytic technique. And just want to share where that is. Generative AI is cool and it's important, but it's not the only thing. There are these other techniques out here too. And the fascinating thing is, just even 10 years ago, this was neural networks, deep learning, they were the coolest thing ever. We thought, hey, this is going to take every job away. The robots will take over. There will be no work left to do. And we were wrong. The other fascinating thing about it is that cool AI, the newest thing ever, is now called traditional AI. That's how fast things move along. Okay? But let's go through these one by one. Rule-based systems. When I first started working, this was what AI was. Basically, a lot of if-then statements. And we got pretty good at doing these things. One of my first jobs as an engineer was to have a way to rationalize the rules in these rule-based systems and make sense of them. These are good. But the way you do them is you have an expert or a set of experts and you ask them, if this happens, what do you do? And you create it basically if-then sentences. Now, I'm oversimplifying this, but give you the right intuition. Okay? It's programmed with expert input. You don't need a lot of data because the experts have the knowledge. It can be very precise, and it will give you the same answer every time. It can also explain. You can also say what rules were there, what was important there. Next up are the more numerical techniques. This is econometrics, statistics. Many of us learned some of this in school. Many of us still do it. Just because it's old technology doesn't mean it's wrong. It's tremendously useful, right? Classifying the blue from the green. What are bad loans or not bad loans? What is a sick person or not a sick person? It can be very good at that. It can also be very good at finding these trend lines, not only there, but in multiple dimensions. And by the way, it doesn't have to be linear. You can do all kinds of fun curves too. This is all stuff that we've known for decades how to do this, but it's still very useful because given a set of data, it can estimate where the trend lines are. It can estimate how to weight different features to make a decision on whether it's A or B or C. Okay? Very useful. We don't want to give up on that. Next stage here is deep learning. Now, engineering professors, close your ears right now. It's different methods, but it's the same idea. Give it data and it will learn how to create these weighted averages to figure out what the answers are. The thing it can do though, it has some different, less limited on how it does the classification, and it can also deal with much more complex situations. Lots of data comes in, you can get to lots of outputs, and it goes through here in many steps. Now what's happening here is, if you're doing rule-based systems, you have to know the rules. If you're doing a regression analysis, you can look at the formulas and you could say, this variable gets this much weight, this variable gets this much weight, because it has learned to figure out what those weights are. In this case, it does the same thing. It figures out what weights to put on things, but you can't figure it out when you look at it. When all of these weights in here are there, you can't make sense of it. Now, some of the best people at MIT are trying to figure it out, and we're making some progress, but you're not going to be able to explain your answer. You're just going to be able to say the answer is usually pretty good. Okay? There are good technical ways to say that, right? It could be good, not great. And so what does that mean? First of all, it is reinforcement learning. You have no experts involved. It runs, it's right or wrong, and then it goes back and basically turns the dials. And if you do that 10 or 20 or 50,000 times, the dials tend to be about right. Okay? But the thing is that it is repeatable. You'll always get the same answer. You can't explain it. And then there's this. Generative AI is taking those techniques, but instead of just classifying, it's creating new stuff. And once again, I'm oversimplifying a really complicated thing, but what it basically does is it takes what it knows and what you prompted it to do, and it identifies sets of 3 or 4 words. And then it runs the models and says, these words seem to fit best. And then it goes on and says, okay, now let's take those words, what you asked me and what I know, and let's identify more sets of things. And it says, okay, that set seems to work best. And it piles these things up in a random way. What does that mean? It can generate new stuff that looks pretty good. What it also means is it's not going to generate the same thing every time. It's designed to have randomness in there. The other thing is it's actually doing it. It's saying, this sounds about right to go with that. That doesn't mean it really is right. It just sounds right. Statistically, it sounds right. And so you get these hallucinations that Srini talked about and other things. So what happens, it randomly chooses the next steps. You can create all kinds of things, not just text, but you can create video, you can create music, you can create these deep fakes. I don't know whether you've seen the videos where you take, me saying whatever I didn't say, but the video looks pretty convincing. Bad people are using it just as well as good people. The phishing attacks are getting very good, but you do have these hallucinations. The most famous case in the United States is a lawyer who wrote up his court documents using ChatGPT, and it turned out the judge got really upset because some of the cases that the lawyer cited did not exist. You do not want to be that person, okay? So make sure you have the processes in right to make sure that these are correct, not just interesting sounding. It requires a whole lot of data. And you also have these questions that Srini was talking about IP. So now I've taken basically each one of these could have been a week of training. I've given about 2 minutes on each. So just knowing within those limitations, hopefully you at least have some better idea on how these fit. And the reason this is important is if you go looking for a generative AI problem to solve, you're doing it the wrong way. The best problems will be solved through a combination of generative AI, regular AI, and other things. But hopefully this can help you understand what might be appropriate for some details. So, we got our little dials here. If you don't have a lot of data, don't try to do deep learning, but maybe experts can be useful. If you need it to be explainable, well, probably not spend a lot of time here. Now, there's some work happening in that space. Go up there, right? If it needs to be repeatable, it needs to be there, probably not here, right? So this can help you at least get the sniff test on what's reasonable. Then what you want to do is really go back with your technical people and make the right decision after you've done this decision based on your instincts. So I just have a few minutes left. Having done this, having talked now about what this is and how it's useful, having shown you some ideas of how you can use it in a company and how to think about the different categories, the last bit is what else? How do we make this work in a company? How do you integrate this in your business strategy? So with just the last few minutes, I want to give you some questions you can ask, a way to think about this as you're making it happen in your company. There are really, in a company, there are 3 major things that you need to be able to do right in this world. And none of them are easy. But if you're not actually being careful about it, they're all being done anyway. They're just being done badly. So paying attention to this can be really important. Prioritization is one of the big ones. And once again, if you are going out and saying, find me a deep learning problem, that's the wrong answer. That's the idea that I have a hammer, and so every one of you looks like a nail that I can hit, right? And that's not what you want to do. Start with the problem. And so here are some good companies that do this, right? Number one, strictly speaking, we don't invest in AI or natural language or image. We're always investing in a business problem. And Airbus is doing some very interesting things in their manufacturing with AI, some of it generative, most of it not. Home Depot, very similar. Home Depot is a home goods store, so if you're going to renovate your house or if you had to do some plumbing work, you go to Home Depot. They do a similar thing, right? You should always be looking for extraordinary experiences that bring joy and delight the customer. What we use for technology, that's underneath, that's hidden. So if I go to Home Depot and I say, get me one of these things, where do I find one of these things? We can figure out where one of these things is. It can at least get you to the right aisle, right? If I just bought something for my bathroom It'll say, you know, here's what the manufacturer recommends that goes with it, that sink with that toilet. But here's 5 or 6 other things, mirrors and toilets and things that would work with that. Right? All kinds of opportunities that you can do to make the experience from the customer side, also in the supply chain, in the operations, those kinds of things. So here are some questions you can ask if you have a problem you're trying to solve that can help you think about this. Number one, what's the cost of being wrong? If I'm making a medical diagnosis, I cannot be wrong. If I'm sending an email to you, I can be wrong all the time, right? So that can help you decide which method might be more useful to help it. Now, then some other ones. Does it have to be explainable? Do you have to repeat the same answers? If you are in finance, you should get the same answer every time when you're making loans. If you don't, then you're open to lots of questioning. But other places it might not matter. For example, if you are hiring people, hiring that person isn't necessarily important, but hiring somebody with those characteristics. So if all 3 of you are the same characteristics, I don't care which one I get, there the accuracy can be a little different as long as we don't have bias. And then the other question to ask is these questions about bias. And you'll hear these things, you've already heard it today, but you're gonna hear it more. You know, these things are trained on data. It learns from making predictions on data and then adjusting its embeddings, its weights. What if that data is not representative of the world? What if you train only on men? What is that going to do with women? What if you train only on adults? What about children? What about only rich people? What about people who are not as rich? So are you training it to make wrong decisions for people other than what you trained it on? And we do this accidentally, but we want to be careful. So you want to go back and see whether you have bias in your models. The other is, you know, do you just have a source of truth at all? If you're trying to say, how do I make a good health decision, but you don't know how to make that you don't know how to make that health decision anyway, well, how are you going to know whether you made the right decision or not? Now, the AI can help you figure that out. And in fact, in radiology, it has figured out rules. There are like 5 rules for reading an X-ray for breast cancer, and it figured out 2 or 3 more rules. It can help you with that, but you still need to know this person has cancer and this person doesn't. So when you're saying, what is a good customer? What is a successful project? You kind of have to define that. It has to know that stuff. Okay? So do you have source of truth? Are you generalizable? And then in an organization, what about the capabilities we're going to develop? And so one of the things to think is, what policies do we have? Do we want to do it top down, centralized? Do we want to be decentralized? One is more innovative, one is more efficient. How do you get the right hybrid strategy? How are we going to find and share and build upon our innovations? Are we going to let a lot of things happen? Can we learn across or not? Are we just going to let it happen? And I have more slides to go through, but I want to just ask a few more questions in here. Can your culture do it? Is your culture comfortable with learning through experience, with doing little things and training and failing quickly and learning quickly? Or is your culture one of those things that if you are wrong, you are in trouble? These innovations, there's a learning process. It's learn fast, fail cheap. Is your culture ready for that? And is your culture ready to learn from the machines? Or will people reject it because that machine cannot be as smart as me? And last but not least, what about talent and careers? And the minister was talking about that for the country, but what about for your company? Do we have the skills to build these models, but also, as these things start to take over more work, what does this mean for our people? Are we going to help them move to a better job? Or are we going to let them worry all the time whether these computers are going to steal their job? As leaders, that's an important thing to get through, and we need to be thinking about those now. So that's why I've set up this thing called the Global Opportunity Forum, which is a way for companies to talk to companies about what you're doing, and for researchers to help solve some problems as you think through it. So, last thought here, this is a learning experience. We cannot tell you the answer. You're going to get to the answer by working on it, by learning about it. And so it's, those of you who have changed tires, and it turns out that I never taught my son to do this, you don't just screw that one bolt down because you're going to bend the wheel. You do a little bit here, a little bit there. And so Artie from H&M says this. Let's do a little bit, and we will learn to get better about this over time. You'll do the same thing in your company. So I want to thank you for listening. Hopefully this has given you a few ideas, a few questions you can think about. I would love to talk to you about this. I'd love to hear what you're doing. Love to hear some of the challenges you have. Just reach out and contact me. AI is not intelligent, but it's still very useful. Number 2, choose the right tool, not just the tool you're thinking about. And number 3, get started. Don't wait until you're perfect. Get started to learn. And don't forget your people. So thank you very much.